Get in the game with the college-branded Venmo debit card. Wreck your team with every tap and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash, a new rewards program from Venmo. No monthly fee, no minimum balance, just school pride and spending power. Get in the game and sign up for the Venmo debit card at venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Not sure how to tackle your taxes? Are you sweating the small print? You may be experiencing FOMO, the fear of messing up. The answer? Using TurboTax on Intuit Credit Karma. They help you get your biggest refund, and then we help you do more with it. With a personalized plan designed to help you hit your money goals. It's time to take your taxes to the max. Start filing today in the Credit Karma app.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. Today I'm joined by my legislative team colleagues Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and Bajpai. We are days away from November, and the state does not have a new comprehensive budget. And the battle is between Republicans, not Republicans and Democrats. In 2019, there wasn't a new comprehensive state budget, but that battle was between then Democratic Governor Roy Cooper and the Republican-controlled legislature. This time, it's House versus Senate to a really excessive degree, I guess I would say. So we're going to talk about the reasons for the holdup, including tax fights and why a clean Medicaid rebase bill couldn't make it across the finish line. As we're recording this on Monday, October 27th, the latest development, and going to be the last maybe through the end of the calendar year, is that Senate Rules Chair Bill Rabin sent 4 bills back to the House at the end of this past week. The House and Senate were back for a couple of days past. I wouldn't even call it a mini budget. I called it a small spending plan in my coverage, because it's not like those 2019 mini budgets that included a lot of raises, a lot of projects, a lot of spending. Of course, it's your tax money, so every dollar counts. They are spending your tax money, but not the number of mini budget bills when there wasn't a comprehensive deal. And now basically they're done. So Raymond sent back these bills to the House for, and I'm quoting from the Senate's news release, for violating the General Assembly's agreed upon adjournment resolution for the October session. Rabin's ruling was confirmed by the clerk's office and nonpartisan central staff attorneys. So they're bringing out the lawyers with each other. Of course, a lot of them are lawyers themselves. Luciana, what is this to you? How you see like that? This is where Senate Leader Phil Berger and House Speaker Dustin Hall, I mean, they won't even take each other's bills up at this point. So how would you kind of characterize that this is how far things have broken down this year?
Yeah, I think they're both pretty locked into their stances on certain issues, including taxes, as well as Medicaid, which is tied to a children's hospital funding. So they're just locked into their stances, and it doesn't seem like they're particularly willing to budge on those issues. So it's kind of an all or nothing, and that kind of leaves little room for debate and for being able to take each other's bills or make changes and get things actually passed. So I think that's where I'm seeing it at right now.
Avi, were you surprised they actually went home, seemingly potentially for good? So there are these short sessions for a few days in November and December. And some of them, things come up like Arena's Law. That was something, obviously, that they wouldn't have known that was going to be a priority when they were back last time. But the fact that there's really just not so little movement and so much disagreement of not even accepting each other's bills and this procedural drama that we might end 2025 with. I mean, that's it. And they're both Republicans, too.
Yeah, I mean, Speaker Hall said at the end of session last week to the whole body, he seemed pretty comfortable saying that the House doesn't expect to come back for any more business this year. So that's pretty significant that we're hearing that kind of early. We still have 2 months left, 2 full months left in the year. But it's not entirely surprising because we've noticed that the last 2 times they've been back, they're not really spending a lot of time. There's not a lot of overlap between the 2 chambers in terms of when they're physically in the building. So even if there was like a last minute agreement that came together suddenly, or if one chamber decided they wanted to, they would agree, like concur with changes to a bill or whatever, that there's not really scope for that if the other chamber isn't present, if everyone's gone home.
That's a really good point. Even with these past 2 very brief sessions where it's usually, us in the press corps where our worst case scenarios, they're in session or adjourn at the same time when we're trying to get, lawmakers from both chambers at the same time. But thankfully we can, divide and conquer with our team. But it's the Senate's been early, they'll come a day early. And I think last time they were just done, didn't see the House at all, where there was a little bit of overlap because of the second day vote on the very controversial MAP bill, which I think everyone is well familiar with by this point. We talked about it on last week's episode. So the Senate came and went and the House was there longer. And what this latest thing with Senator Uribe sending the bills back, the House amended the adjournment resolution and added these additional bills to pass, but the Senate was already gone. And even as the House is on the floor talking about this, their lawmakers are saying, like, why are we doing this? What's even? But I think at this point, it really has just gone down to them messaging each other through whatever their floor action is, or with answering the questions that we have for them.
And I could be wrong, but it feels like, when you think of disagreements in the past as well, when they get to the stage where they're sort of messaging publicly, it seems like the talks are not going in a productive direction. Like if things were constructive, then you would hear, I think when the negotiation shifts from private to like public messaging and blame shifting and all this stuff, the blame game, then the scope for constructive talks, you can kind of infer that it's not happening because that kind of makes things harder and sort of jeopardizes, I would think, a little bit the scope for negotiation. So if we're in this phase, then it seems like things have kind of deteriorated.
I mean, Berger and Hall are talking to each other about, various things, and they did have to agree on this small spending bill. But they're not talking to each other in any way that's productive about the comprehensive state budget. And they, I asked Speaker Hall before they went home, I said, why say that there's probably nothing in November when you and Senate Leader Berger could just decide we're coming this week, we're having a sit down and try to find something else or some other mini budget, something like that. And Hall said because they talk on the phone or whatever, and that unless they actually are going to have a deal, he doesn't really see a point of bringing everybody back for this. But a big issue is Medicaid. So Luciana, so Governor Stein said, these cuts are going to happen. Speaker Hall has said, you have more time, and Berger, you don't have to do this. And the House tried to run multiple clean bills, and the Senate doesn't want a clean bill on the Medicaid funding, right?
Yeah, I think going back 1 second to what we were talking about, somebody kind of, something happening so that there's a deal. I think Rep. Sarah Crawford spoke about needing a hero, and that one chamber needs to be the hero in this situation. So I thought that kind of, is a point there that neither side wants to do anything that's going to, affect what they exactly want. And somebody needs to just change their position somehow. But on Medicaid, basically the House and the Senate agree that more funding is needed for the rebase to keep, provider reimbursement payment rates running and the program running smoothly. But they don't agree on the little deals within that. The Senate wants to have children's hospital funding in a bill, and the House does not. So the House, as you already mentioned, Dawn, passed some bills last week, which included a bill to provide more Medicaid funding, I believe pulling from a reserve fund, and then another Medicaid bill as well as a Medicaid bill to related to Planned Parenthood. So they passed a lot of bills. The Senate didn't take those up. The Senate had already also passed some bills, including on Planned Parenthood and such, and said, you could just take up our own bills instead of passing new ones. So a lot of messaging. And then the Senate also has said that it was willing to strike a deal with the House to cut the Children's Hospital funding in half in order to get it through the finish line in the limited spending bill that you mentioned. And they said that the House didn't really want to negotiate on that. But, from the House, you're hearing something separate that they have been. But yeah, it's just really tied up in everything, as we've already kind of mentioned. But it's a big deal for people who might see the effects of those cuts.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about how this stalemate is so long and what actually is the result of there not being any movement. We'll be right back.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, your team's home base. Collaborate within a shared PDF space. You've got your docs, your plans, your specs, and then invite the crew to build what's next. They talk up the teamwork. Here's an updated render. They think that this design could be a contender. And when somebody wonders what's the next step, AI helps you finish the rest. Bolts are tight, now your plan's refined. Run a smoother business when you're all aligned. Do that with Acrobat. Learn more at adobe.com/do-that-with-Acrobat.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with Avi Bajpai and Luciana Perez Uribe Guinassi. Before the break, we were talking about really the breakdown between Senate Leader Phil Berger and House Speaker Dustin Hall when it comes to a comprehensive new state budget. And Medicaid is sort of the latest football factor, I guess, in this, and the Senate wanting to tie it to something else. The House and Senate already agree on spending Medicaid money. So some of this also has to do with Governor Stein and him, deciding this deadline where Berger and Hall are saying, like, the money hasn't run out yet, and Stein has said, no, but we need to, you can't just keep operating knowing that the money is going to end. So what else, what do we need to know about, like, how these actual timelines with the Stein administration and DHHS and money running out and changing with Medicaid?
Yeah, so lawmakers already provided funding to the rebase earlier. What Stein and the state's Health and Human Services Department has said is that it's not enough to kind of keep everything running smoothly. Lawmakers in the Senate and House do agree that to provide more funding, but they don't agree that it needs to be immediately. They've said that this can be held off until April of next year. And they've also, with Speaker Hall saying that DHHS has actually admitted that the funding runs through April. And I have seen a letter from DHHS which says that. So, lawmakers have been saying basically this is not really a crisis. It's not immediately needed to take action on it. But Stein is saying and has said that you can't put that funding on a credit card, and that basically if you keep pushing it back, you're going to then run into the issue of having to, take steeper cuts or even potentially them not reaching a deal later on, so that, action needs to be taken now. And so DHHS made those cuts on October 1st, and they're currently active and will continue to be unless something changes.
Well, it looks like it's not going to, right?
Yeah.
And so, do you think Stein maybe put this deadline thinking that there was going to be some more funding coming, and then it didn't, I guess?
Yeah, I believe Speaker Hall has said that it was, a negotiating tactic, a pressure tactic, and that it actually didn't work out quite the way that Stein may have wanted, and in that lawmakers took it seriously and put more funding there. So yeah, that's, I think he was hoping that more funding could be put there, but that hasn't materialized, so.
And we're seeing a little bit of Hall versus Stein on social media, talking to each other publicly about, or at least through social media publicly about, like, no, you did this because it's interesting because Stein actually supported the House's budget proposal. And so this is kind of maybe like the highest profile kind of rift between Stein, I think, and Republicans this year, because, this is Stein's first year of his first term, and he's kind of grown this reputation of talking to Republicans a lot about, trying to find compromise and reaching deals, even though obviously they're, opposite ends of the political spectrum. The other thing we need to note about because I just mentioned about the taxes, and Luciana had mentioned too, the main difference here is about state revenue and this divide between Berger and Hall, or more broadly, House and Senate Republicans, about the future state revenue and the triggers for these future tax cuts, which Senate Republicans have painted as it's going to be a tax increase. It doesn't mean your current taxes are going up. It just means future tax cuts that may have happened wouldn't happen if you go with the House's plan. And the reason future tax cuts is such a big deal is because you have to have enough money to run the state, and the House and more broadly, the Stein administration and Office of State Budget Management, Fiscal Research are looking at their revenue forecast and how much money is the state going to have? Can we afford these tax cuts? Where the Senate Republican position is, yes, we can afford these tax cuts. Just what you think might happen might not necessarily happen. And I don't really know how you come to the middle in that,
No, I think tax policy is pretty foundational when you're talking about a budget. So if there's disagreement on that, then it doesn't kind of bode well for the rest of the negotiation, I think. And everything we're hearing, it all seems to point in the direction of don't expect a whole lot before short session. It sounds like, because you're talking about an April timeline for the Medicaid stuff as well. So seems like everyone is kind of in let's reset in April mode right now. And
people have, been critical of the fact that Berger as a primary is somehow tied to, his tax policy. But I don't know if the results of a primary changes like your view on tax policy. You either have the money or think you'll have the money or don't. And of course, the result is if they don't do anything, the triggers stay in place. And if the state doesn't have enough money to keep spending, what they want, then they'll have to look at, well, do they have these hundreds of millions of dollars for these projects? For the Opportunity Scholarship Program is very expensive. Public education is very expensive. The Children's Hospital also very expensive, which is why Hall brings up he quipped. I said, well, what if there's no money? He's like, well, if they want got to pay for their children's hospital. So a lot of these really big ticket items are what we're going to be looking at. But then that small spending plan does spend other money and raises a little money for the state. The State Capital Infrastructure Fund and that bill that Stein signed last week will get money from them selling basically a right-of-way, which is just grass and a sidewalk and trees next to Longleaf Hotel and Lounge, which all of us have passed by thousands of times on the way into downtown. They'll sell that money and put it in the SCIF. Sell that land and put that money in the SCIF. And then also sell the old Rex Hospital on Wade Avenue, which will involve some movement of state employees. And it'll sell or long-term lease to redevelop that property. So that's actually going to happen. And money in the SCIF funds projects like the massive education campus that's being built across from the legislative building, which will be empty for a while, maybe until 2026. But it's North Carolina state politics. We don't always know what's going to happen. So maybe Berger and Hall, if you're listening to this, maybe you guys are meeting right now and we'll have some big budget news by tomorrow. So, all right.
Late night press release.
Right. Well, let's move on to our picks for Headliner of the Week. Avi, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so it is kind of sad for me to report that I will be leaving the NNO. And my last day will be, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, a week from Tuesday. So I'll have more to say on where I'll be going. But I will be sticking around. I'll be continuing to cover the legislature. I've really thoroughly enjoyed that, and I've loved my time at the NNO. It's been an honor to be on the podcast fairly regularly. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been a lot of fun. Going all the way back to doing like live Twitter spaces from like campaign rallies and just doing all kinds of stuff. And it's been great to discuss NC poll with everyone every couple of weeks. So I will miss everyone here a lot.
We'll miss having you in the newsroom, but glad that we still have you as a colleague, just not for the same news organization.
Capitol Press Corps colleague. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
I hope you're allowed to still sit next to me in the press room downstairs at the legislature.
I hope. Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think that's an N&O desk. So
Yeah.
but I'll be
I'll
all
vote
right.
for yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, can have you on the podcast, as a guest. And then maybe I'll ask you what you get in the legislative cafeteria.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Luciana, who or what is your headliner?
Well, mine is the City of Oaks races. They do 10K marathon and half marathon. They are running that this Sunday. I ran it last year and it was a lot of fun. So just thinking of other people running that race, and hopefully I will run it again another year. So.
All right. My headliner is, it has to be, since I love holidays, Halloween. So happy Halloween, everybody. I hope you give out good stuff to trick-or-treaters and have fun at your parties and everything else that you do. And we'll see you next week, which will already be November by then. For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan with Avi Bajpai, Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and producer Laura Brache. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Sign up for our political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.